Hello, welcome to today's episode of me reviewing this various highlights. I know yesterday's episode was a little, what's the word? Where my voice was little affected, but I'm feeling a lot better today. And I have my cup of coffee, and where is that? Yeah, okay, the cup of coffee, and we are all ready to start. So let's get started with, oh man, that's a long one from getting things done. So let's quickly read through this. If you neglect this categorization and allow things of different meanings into the same visual or mental grouping, you will tend to go psychologically numb to the contents. It's talking about categorization of different tasks, and if you're trying to put everything in the same categorization, as in you're not really trying to distinguish between different types of tasks that you have. Distinguishing the categorization could be things like is it relevant today or tomorrow or Sunday? Or is it relevant when you are seated in your office or when you're on the move or when you're at a grocery store, so on. If you put reference materials in the same pile as things you still want to read, for example, you'll go unconscious to the stack. Same thing. If you put items on your next actions list that really need to go on the calendar because they have to occur on specific days, then you won't trust your calendar and you'll continue have to reassess your action lists. Again, like there are some items that are more suitable for calendar, and if you mix them up again, you'll just look at the whole pile and not be able to trust it. If you have projects that you're going to be doing about anything for some time, then they must go on your someday maybe list, so you can relate to the projects list with the rigorous action generating focus it needs. So the projects that needs to be done right now, they have to be on a list, on a different list than someday, maybe something like today, or where you are like basically scheduling it, because before they go into the list, any project, like the author says in other sections of the book, there is nothing like writing down a project. There's nothing like a project, in fact. You are writing down the next action item. You're never writing down a project in your list, because that doesn't help you. Because if you look at at a project and you don't know what's the next action item you do, uh, you're lost again. The list is not actually helping you. So when you're putting down the list, putting down something on the list, yeah, you may be writing down the project name, but you're actually writing down the next action item that you're going to generate, that you need to do. So yeah, if they must any projects that you're working on right now, the next action items needs to go on the appropriate list. And I think that's really it. This is again like a summary of different aspects that the author covers in this particular chapter, about basically classifying the task items in different lists and then managing the lists themselves. Moving on, the well-lived life. It's a new book I've started reading. It's interesting. It's not exactly what I would normally read, which is why it is useful, right? I mean, sometimes I need to read books that I don't normally read. So, when looking at darkness and light, or inhaling and exhaling, we can focus on only one or the other in any given moment. That means that throughout our lives, we are fundamentally faced with a choice. Will we direct our attention towards love or towards fear? So, this particular chapter, it's in a section where the author is talking about love is really everything. That is what heals. That is what drives the life force. And so the author is comparing, the binary nature of love and fear, as against love and hate, as like the normal opposites, like as the normal language advocates that this is the opposite, love and hate. But the author is saying love or towards fear. So if you're the author is saying that the opposite of love is fear, so that when you're not looking at a situation with love in your eyes, you're probably afraid of it. That's the point. So that's what the author is saying. When looking at darkness and light, or inhaling and exhaling, we can focus on only one. So if you're loving, you can't be afraid of that. Or if you're afraid of something, you can't love it. And that's the path towards healing. Choosing love every time, not choosing fear. Moving on, kill it with fire. The occasional outage and problem with the system, particularly if it is resolved quickly and cleanly, can actually boost the user's trust and confidence. The technical term for this effect is the service recovery paradox. So the author is talking about this paradox where if a service doesn't go down at all, it does not really generate users trust. It's something, there are various ways to look at it, I suppose, but I think it's like, people take it for granted. It's there, and it's not really doing anything for the trust. But if there is an occasional outage and problem with the system, and it recovers quickly, that's the point. You recover quickly from it, not let it linger for days. um, then that restores that boosts the user's trust in the system. So the author is balancing this with generating new features, and that availability metric, the number of nines that you have, and people, they aim for as many nines as possible, like four nines or seven nines or whatever. And the author makes a point that the amount you increase, the target, if you keep increasing your target, your SLA or SLO, if you keep increasing that, and you want as many nines as you can get, but that comes at the expense of new features going in, right? So you have to play this balance. We have discussed this before, that it's all a trade-off in software engineering, in all engineering really, it's all a trade-off. So if you want higher reliability, that comes at the expense of new features, that comes at the expense of innovation, and it comes at the expense of users being happy with the product, because it may not do what the current leading edge products would do. So yeah, um, emulating failures, things like chaos monkey, for example, where you introduce points of failure in the system. Sorry, not points of failure, where you introduce failures in the system at different points, and then you measure what does the system do, how does it react, does it recover, how quickly it recovers. That's the kind of thing that you want, that you want to test. You don't want a failure when you're least prepared for it. So you prepare for it with practice. That's what leads back to this paradox, that you prepare for it with practice and you quickly recover. That's what gets you the user's trust, rather than never failing. Okay, team topologies. People in the stream-aligned team need to be open to being helped by the enabling team. They need to have an open mind to new approaches and be aware that the enabling team has probably seen some better approaches. The There are different types of teams in the team topologies model. You have stream-aligned team and enabling team. These two are mentioned over here, but you also have platform team and complicated subsystems team. So stream-aligned team is the core team that delivers some business outcome. It could be your project team, the team that delivers the builds features. An enabling team is a team that can get into help a stream-aligned team to improve certain practice. It could be improving a certain technology, usage of a technology or certain methodology and so on. And the author is just making a point that the streamline team needs to have an open mind. They can't resist the ideas that are introduced by enabling mind. I'm not saying that they should never question, but they can't resist. Sometimes it's that, okay, what do they know? They'll just come in and introduce changes for the sake of introducing changes, and that's not the model that you want. So let's move on. The earned life. Curious about IBM's performance appraisal system, I analyzed the employees' year-end reviews and discovered this is how IBM defined a top performer. Performs effectively with no need for coaching. Basically, IBM had created a vicious cycle whereby if the manager offered coaching, the employee was incentivized to respond. No, thank you, boss. I perform effectively with no need for coaching. You can't make this up. Okay. So, it's kind of like the author is describing a catch-all, the catch-22 situation, where the expectation on the employees was that they perform effectively with no need for coaching. I've seen that similar things in job description, with no hand holding or with minimal support and all of that. And the expectation on the manager was to offer coaching. But if the manager, like the author says, if the manager goes and offers coaching, the employee is actually going to say no, that no, I don't want coaching, because it's in their job description that they're going to work without coaching. So this is where it gets down to the cultural levels of an organization, and it's funny here, but it happens more often than we think. We say certain things that, okay, we want people that they seek help and everything, but at the same time we are saying that they should never collaborate, or we don't say that. We say that they should work independently, or alone or with minimal hand holding and everything. So yeah, it's just a note on how we say two different things, and introduce that in our culture. And culture is what we do, really, not what we say. We have discussed this many times on our on this episodes before. Culture is our behaviors. It's a collection of our behaviors. And if you are behaving this way, if we write these things in job description, if we set these kind of expectations on employees, and other the opposing expectations on managers, yeah, the organization is not going to go anywhere. Moving on, kill it with fire. Good modernization work needs to suppress that impulse to create elegant, comprehensive architectures upfront. You can have your neat and orderly system, but you won't get it from designing it that way in the beginning. Instead, you will build it through iteration. So this talks really, to me, it talks about perfection. Trying to get that system perfect from the day one, and that means you may want to have like a perfectly scalable system from day one, or a completely consistent design. When talking about software design or UX design, also, both of them, having a perfect design on day one rather than building something and then learning from your customers. So yeah, good modernization work, like the author says, it needs to suppress that impulse to create that perfect system or elegant, comprehensive architectures upfront. I'm not using the word perfect, but it means that to me. So let's move on. The reading list. I think you can read whatever you want what to into anything. That is the point of books. So I forget the names of this. It's a fiction book, and I forget the name of the characters. But there is the protagonist, an old man who goes to this library and finds a reading list and everything. And they're talking about. He's telling this to somebody, that um, um, basically how you interpret certain things in books. And it's a nice line, that you can read whatever you want to into anything. So it's all interpretation. How much ever care you. To me, it means that how much ever care you put into writing, it can still be read in multiple ways, and that awareness is important. Yes, it's important to frame sentences, frame your words or your languages as consistently as possible, as clearly as possible, but then it still can be misinterpreted. That's the nature of language. So yeah, moving on. Getting things done. Thinking in a concentrated manner to define desired outcomes and requisite next actions is something few people feel they have to do until they have to. But in truth, it is the most effective means for making wishes a reality. It's an extension of discussion that we had in the first. This was I mentioned earlier that you really need to write down next action items, not project names. When you're like, for example, you're working on a project X, you're not going to write project X on your to-do list. You're going to figure out what is the next action item you need to do on project X. There is a good example over here. The author mentions that somebody needed to write. Somebody wrote down, get tune up, get a car tune up, that is, or like some altered phrasing of that intent, that going to get a tune up for their car. And the author makes a point that, okay, is that really the next action item? So unless you're going to take a wrench and go to the car and do the tune up yourself, this is not the next action item. And so the author goes on exploring that, okay, they have to find a garage and they have to make an appointment. So like the next action item is finding a garage, and then they got a reference to a certain mechanic from somebody. So now actually the next action item is to go and find that reference from that somebody, or contact that person for that reference, for that contact number. So really, like, breaking it down, what is the absolute next action item that you need to do? So get it tune up doesn't help. That's not really the next action item. I mean, it seems like that, right? But it's not really the next action item. If you dig deeper into it, you really get down multiple steps, and then you see that the next action item is really call someone to find out the contact of the mechanic. So yeah, that is what you need to start being productive, start being efficient. Moving on, molecule of more. This comes up every day pretty much now. Testing the ability to manipulate abstract ideas, courtesy of the dopamine control circuit, is a fundamental part of how psychologists measure intelligence. This is talking about IQ test, and there is this constant criticism of IQ tests that they don't really measure intelligence; they measure our capability of abstract reasoning. And there are different kinds of intelligence, right? It's not just this one nature. IQ measures just one thing, and I think that even that's questionable. But yeah, this is what psychologists use to measure intelligence. It's referring to IQ tests over here. Moving on to the leadership challenge. The center of gravity for business loyalty, whether it be the loyalty of customers, employees, investors, suppliers, or dealers, is the personal integrity of the senior leadership team and its ability to put its principles into practice. I think it's fairly straightforward, and we have seen this again and again that all of this comes down to values, to principles. That is why it is so important to get them right. And again, it's not just a question of finding the correct words that you want to put into your values document. It's a question of living it day to day. It's a question of living up to your principles on a day to day basis, and that is what matters. That is what affects the loyalty of whoever the author is mentioning over here, the general integrity of a senior leader. That is what is the most important, shall we say, currency for leaders. That brings us to the end of our highlights today. Today's was actually quite fun, and I just noticed, I'm at 16-minute mark. It was quite fun. A lot of in-depth quotes, and yeah, I think much better day today. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day. Bye.